Okay, now, wait, shit, never mind. Okay, so imagine that Catholicism, in its most Marian form, is metaphysically true. That is to say, that the Virgin Mary is capable of everything, anything. So it could very well be the case that there is a child drowning in a river in India, and at the same time, there's a child who is starving to death in Mexico or Africa. Pick your third world country. Pick these two scenarios: the drowning child, the starving child. Now, we as humans and as philosophers, ethicists, some of us, myself not included, might wonder a lot about how to decide who to save in this scenario. Do we go with the drowning child? Do we go with the starving child? How do we evaluate whose life is going to maybe produce more utils, or what's the deontological? None of that matters. When you're the Virgin Mary, you can do both at the same time. Literally. Now, I'm not asking you to believe in the Virgin Mary and her ability to do this, but as a sort of counterfactual, as we say, consider that there is such an entity as the Virgin Mary who is capable of at least that much, of saving 2 children simultaneously. Really, she could probably save 1 million children simultaneously, but let's keep the example simple. Now, what's she going to see as a subject if she's just doing these 2 things on the one side of the world? That's why I use Mexico. On the one side of the world, there is this starving child. On the other side of the world, in India, there is this drowning child. Now, she sees them both simultaneously, and she acts upon them both simultaneously so as to save them both simultaneously. So you might think of, in a sense, we've got 2 eyes, so imagine that one of your eyes is in Mexico and one of your eyes is in India. That might be, I think, the best way to imagine what it would be like to be the Virgin Mary in that scenario, is to have one eye on the child in Mexico and one eye on the child in India. Now, if you find that at all appealing, just to your intuitions, not to any sort of metaphysical truth, but if that sounds like, well, yeah, if there were a Virgin Mary, and she were to simultaneously save these 2 children, this is probably what it would seem like to be her. What it would be like to be the Virgin Mary there. All right. Now, let's imagine that actually, things are going a lot better in India, and there's just a starving child in Mexico. The problem is that there's another planet Earth in this universe, a parallel planet Earth. The universe happens to be symmetrical. We're just going to add that in. I don't think that's going to, it doesn't depend on you believing in the Virgin Mary. Neither does believing in the Virgin Mary depend on you believing in a parallel, actually symmetrical universe. So, we've got these 2 admittedly somewhat outlandish assumptions about the way things might work. But all right. Now, the Virgin Mary, let's assume, is actually a god or goddess of the universe. So it's going to be the same Virgin Mary who saves people on this earth as saves people on the mirror earth. So now, on the mirror earth, of course, we've got our mirror child starving to death in Mexico. And on our own planet Earth, we have our mirror child starving to death in Mexico. In Mexico. We don't call it the starving or the mirror child. We just call it the original child here. They call it the original child there. We've got our prejudices about that. But the Virgin Mary just sees our two planets as equivalent. And like I was saying about if your two eyes were in these two different places, now you imagine that one eye is here, and one eye is across the universe. So what Mary actually sees when she saves both of these children from starving in their respective Mexicos is the same thing in both eyes. There isn't that weird dichotomy of one eye is seeing the drowning child in India, one eye is seeing the starving child in Mexico. Both eyes are seeing the starving child in Mexico. In a Mexico. It looks exactly the same, and every action that Mary has to undertake to manifest this miracle is going to be the same in both worlds. Okay, so we've gotten this far. Now here's the question. How do you know, given the possibility that we've discussed, that there's a symmetric mirror universe, and that if you were the kind of being who lived in both universes, who could act in both universes, that you would see in one eye the same thing as in the other, because the universes are the same. How do you know that you're not that type of creature? And I don't mean, cover one eye and then cover the other. But how do you really know that your consciousness, what you consider to be your own proprietary consciousness, is not also the proprietary consciousness of your twin in the mirror earth, the symmetrical earth? What if you were that child that Mary was looking at? And what if there's really only one child? Now, a lot of people don't like this idea. They like the idea that each child, even though there's only one Mary who saves them both, each child is equally thankful. Each child has his or her own, whichever gender they are, they're the same gender. That child, those two children, they both contribute this gratitude toward the universe. There's twice as much gratitude, you might say, because there's twice as many people feeling it. So, how do we know there's twice as many people feeling it? That is, how do you know that you're not sharing a single consciousness with your identical twin on the other side of the universe? So there's only so much joy. It's a joy you share, but it's not a joy you each create. There's just one.